Welcome back to the Fly Culture podcast with me, Pete Tigers. It's that time of year. It's the autumn edition of the magazine is about to hit the streets, and we're really pleased with how this one's looking and, importantly, how it's reading as well. Thanks to Damon Valentine for such a fantastic cover. But in this issue, we're going to take you all around the UK to Montana and lots of other places too. So I hope you're going to enjoy this. And yeah, visit our website if you want to support independent publishing. Right, onto the podcast. I talked today with Simon Francis, who's become the chairman of the Wild Trout Trust. We cover a lot of ground, including his fishing career and what he plans and hopes to do in his new role with the Wild Trout Trust. I think you'll enjoy this one. It's a really nice conversation. Simon, welcome along to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. It's really nice to be here.
And thank you for spending some time to talk with me today. There's lots that we've got to cover, but I guess you're pretty pleased, like many of us, that we've actually had some rain at long last.
So happy, so relieved. Thought it was never going to end. I fish here in Surrey, but also I've got a little cottage down on the East Lyn, and it's been hard. It's been hard to see the river. You don't want to fish it when it's like that. So desperately happy, and also it stops me watering millions of watering cans at a time, the few remaining plants that are left in my garden.
So what does it mean from you, the mixture of fishing? You talk about being based in Surrey and on the Lyn as well. How does that compare from a fishing perspective for you?
Both are small rivers, which I love, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So I fish on the Upper Way as part of the French and Fly Fishers sort of club, and on the East Lyn. Both are small waters, which I absolutely love, but they're really quite different in nature. One spatey, hard granite, small, feisty little fellas and girls, do you know what I mean? Scrappy, that'll hit anything that moves if the mood takes them. Then the others are a little bit more cultured, a bit more diffident, buttery, fat, chubby little wild trout in the Upper Way. But both of them give the thing that I love most, which is the excitement of seeing fish, moving fish, hunting fish, tricksy little casts, hundreds of flies lost in trees, lots of cursing, lots of kneeling down, bow and arrowing, all of that sort of stuff. And both give me that.
That sounds absolutely perfect. It was funny that you mentioned the Lyn there as well, because I was out in Italy with some guys just a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about pocket water fishing, and two of them had come down to three of them actually had come down to one of our fly culture events and went and fished the East Lyn. And probably from a UK perspective, I'm sure there's quite a few places that people think of, but certainly the East Lyn, when I think of that, two words that spring to my mind is pocket water heaven.
100%. And I listened to the podcast with Richard Gorodecki, and he's down at the cottage this week, actually. So it'll be a week sort of after the podcast goes out. But I was so pleased that he got some water and could see it in a bit better state than it was last week when I was sort of down there. But it is, a pool is 3.5 feet, or there's nips and runs and cuts, and the back eddies are hideous to get at because there's a big flow between it, and you're trying out all sorts of intricate casts, parachute casts, all sorts of wiggle casts, just to try and get to something that may be 5 inches long if you're lucky. So that's my style of fishing.
And it's quite a steep gradient as well, isn't it? And some of those boulders are absolutely huge there.
Yeah, I mean, it's staggering, the force of nature when you actually sort of see it. It's a very steep drop to the river from the moor down to Lynmouth. And there was a famous flood, I think in 1953, I think it might be, that actually mullered the town of Lynmouth and killed lots of sort of people. But that moves boulders the size of buses, and it's exhilarating, let's say, when you're in the cottage when there's a full flood on, and you can hear the boulders grinding down, or you see trees coming sort of down at sort of 25 miles an hour and just getting mashed around. It's a force of nature. It's a wild place, that's for sure.
It is pretty special. I've not fished there for a while, I guess because Dartmoor's a little bit more easier for me to get to, but every time I've visited there, I've enjoyed it greatly. And it is one of those places that I think fly anglers who would probably really enjoyed your description as well I think would really love it, wouldn't they? And they'd get what that's about. And of course, it suits pockets quite well as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the test and the itching, it isn't. And I mean that nicely, to the test and itching in many different ways. I love fishing everywhere, but there too. But this is wild. I mean, and then it's on the National Trust property, a lot of it. And there's wood everywhere, hideously steep banks. You're down there on your ass. You're scrambling over the rocks. You don't want to go alone. It's wild fishing in a way that is hard to access in some other parts of the UK, but it's only 3.5, 4 hours from London, and for £10 a day, I think, £35 a year, it's magic. You can't get any better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, Richard and I have been talking today because we were hoping to try and get together, but unfortunately diaries haven't worked out. I know he's got to go off to Bristol as well. But I know he's had a fantastic time. But it is, for listeners, certainly it's worth looking up the East Lyn and getting a real sense of what it looks like and those pockets and these great big boulders. It really is a wonderful place. But I'm sort of getting an idea of where you like to fish. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about you as a fisherman as well. And how would you describe yourself as a fisherman?
Poor. Poor would be the first word. No, I mean, listen, like everyone, I started in my grand's back garden, actually, on the River Colne in Rickmansworth, although I was brought up in the West Country, just outside sort of Bath. That's really where I fell in, first of all, of which I do with incredible regularity. And so that sort of wetted me into sort of fishing a few obliging perch, and then started to fish around sort of Bath on the Avon and Bybrook, for those that know it, which is a lovely little brook. And then I was very fortunate. It was a strange way around of doing things, really. But there was a biology teacher, Mr. Hobson, I think, from memory, who taught me how to tie flies before I'd even learned how to cast or what to do with them. So I learned fly tying, and then sort of had to do something with all of these terrible abominations that I tied, and managed to get onto the Avon and tributaries water, which is the Cam, the Wellow, and the Midford brooks. And so that's where I kind of went crazy with my brother, my partner in crime for life, feral, running around trying to catch sort of trout. So that's how it started, Pete. Yeah.
And that's a lovely. I'm hearing more and more of these stories of people who were influenced by a teacher as well at school. I know we had something in the last edition of the magazine about that. And Yestin, who was out in Italy with me, said that his geography teacher, I think, got him into it as well. And it's lovely. And do you think there are some of these schemes that we talk about many, many times, which are put together, but do you think that form of it is actually the way that you came to it via the teacher? Did he sort of approach you about it? Was that, it wouldn't of course be part of the curriculum, but how did that sort of come about, that he nurtured you as a fly angler? And was that alone, or was that with other people too?
One, I'm so old and my memory is going to be incredibly imprecise, right? But from memory, we were just feral. We were country kids that just went and did our things everywhere, all of the time, out on bikes. Do you know what I mean? And fishing was a big part of sort of that. So I think we were very, very keenly committed, and then found out that he did this fly tying. And I think probably about 4 of us would sit afterwards. I think things are very tough for teachers now. I think you probably have to do a health and safety, extracurricular courses, and they work pretty hard. Sort of anyway, so I don't know how easy it is to actually take kids fishing, right? Fly fishing on a river sounds like a health and safety problem to a lot of people now. Whereas in the old days, you just got off and did things. So I suspect it is quite challenging to do that now. And but it's never been more important, because I think it was David Attenborough that sort of said, what you don't experience, you can't care about. right? So someone has to continue to do this. So I think I read recently that it was one of the national bodies offered free rod licenses for the under 16s for a day just to encourage them. I think it might have been Wales, wasn't it? And any schemes that clubs can do to get people onto the waters. People have a responsibility to some extent, I think, to try and tutor and mentor people, sort of stuff, and to pay it back, right? Because we've all had it. I don't know who taught you, Pete, but Mr. Hobson and Jeremy Heber, who was a guy I fished with at the time, who got me onto the waters. These were the people that I owe a debt to, and I need to pay it on.
That's a nice way to look at it, definitely. When you're fishing, then, how do you like to fish? Do you like to tie on a dry and just work your way up the river? Are you focused? Are you looking for those subtle little things that you need to do, the fly changes? Do you flip on a nymph when you get into a deeper pot? How is it that you like to go about doing your fishing?
It's pretty chaotic out there, Pete. I've listened to some of your podcasts and people seem very either sort of puritanical about things or very well prepared. Mine is much more whimsy than that. It's how the mood takes me on the day. So if I'm salmon fishing, I might proceed down in military fashion and change the fly at the end of everything and then go through it. And the next time I go out, I might be trying some abomination, just that I've made up. So there's a fly called the butt plug bomber, which I invented on the way to Iceland once, which is, those earplugs, right? That you have in the aeroplane. Well, I was looking at it on the plane on the way on Iceland Air up to Iceland, and I caught fish on a bomber before, and I knew that this was going to be hard. The water was low; it was going to be tough, and I thought, I bet they've never seen anything like this before. So that turned into the butt plug bomber, which has caught fish, sadly enough. So it can be any. I don't go with a means or a thing. It'll sometimes depend on the conditions, sometimes how I'm feeling. Sometimes I'll fish the water. Sometimes I'll look for a rise. Sometimes I'll just try something different because why not? I'll just say I'm only going to roll cast today, or I don't know. I don't know what goes on in my head, but it's not logical. That's for sure.
I like the sound of that. You mentioned your brother and being your fishing accomplice. Does that mean that you prefer to fish with people, predominantly him, or do you like those moments alone as well?
Honestly, I like to fish alone. I like, even when I've got guides, I love the guides to give me their insight, sort of stuff. But then them standing over my shoulder, tutting at every mangled cast or, long release fish is not something that does my fragile ego any good. I do love fishing with people. I love guiding people. I like taking people. I qualified as an instructor many, many years ago. Stanek, as it was, shows how old I am. Love doing that. Love helping people. So I'll fish with people like that. But if I'm fishing, I live a busy life like all of us. That's my time. That's genuinely my time. Just to sink into nature, have it put its arms around me and take me where it will.
And so for you, those moments that you're fishing, and have these changed over the years as well? Do you like to grab a few hours when you feel the fishing might be at its best? Or do you like to take the day and fish long and hard? What do you prefer, or is it a combination?
I used to be like hardcore. I'd wake up, I would fish, I would possibly stop to eat half a banana, but would be at it hard all day, every hour, and then be religiously late home beyond the time I said I was going to go home and upset all of my friends and family. Obviously, over time, things have changed. One, I don't get as much sort of time. And two, again, slightly how mood takes me. If I paid a lot of money to go to somewhere like Iceland or for a ticket, which I don't get to do very often, grand days actually, then I will fish quite hard. I want to make the most of that sort of experience. If it's on my local rivers, either here in Surrey where I am today or down on the East Lyn, as I say, I'll nip out. I might go out for 20 minutes. I might catch one fish and just think that was magic and just go straight back to the cottage, hang the rod up and have a cup of tea.
That sounds very, very civilized to me. And it is interesting, isn't it, as we're older, that we don't worry so much about every single moment and being able to pick and choose those things. It definitely changes. And I remember moments where I was sitting with my friend and Ray, and I said, dude, we got to eat some lunch. I'm absolutely exhausted because we'd go hard at it. Yeah, like you say, when you're away, or if you paid for a ticket, or, I know we were talking off mic, and I had a lovely couple of days fishing with Jan, but we didn't start fishing, and Mark as well, but we didn't start fishing for a little while. We were just chatting and messing about because you've got a couple of days even, you look at things slightly differently, don't you? In a more relaxed, right, I've only got a day today, I'm going to hit it hard, I'm going to run up the river, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But it was a very leisurely, relaxed start to things. And I think I cooked some bacon sandwiches and, we didn't rush.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I'd love to wholeheartedly agree with you. I would say that happens after I've caught the first fish or had the first ride. Then I can get pretty leisurely. Then I'd be thinking about a nice cup of coffee and a lie down and try and identify all the birds just by song alone, and all of the other games that you play on the riverside, don't you? The first fish, especially if I haven't fished for a while, sometimes I will be quite hot and intense until I get to that stage. After that, I've caught enough fish, like I'm sure many of your guests, and it's a well-trodden sort of thing. I don't have to be there quite the same. I'd still say I'm probably on the more intense side than some of my friends and people I fish with. But, I'm getting better. I'm recovering. Let's put it that way for you.
And you mentioned about having busy lives. And do you find then that the river is somewhere that you can reset and recharge?
It's the only place for me. It's funny. I've done lots of different sport, and you think it's giving you a clear head, and you think you're not thinking about work or family or whatever else goes through our bread baskets, right? But when I'm fishing, it would be a complete flat line if someone did a brain scan on me. There's nothing going on. I think it's something to do with, like a hunter-gatherer's brain that we used to be, that we've evolved into a state. And it's like a 3D chess. You've got the current, you've got the wind, you've got the line, you've got the fly, you've got the back cast. You're looking at the fish, you're trying to figure out, is it a fish or is it a stick? So I think there's so much brain occupied on the challenges of catching a wild brown trout or grayling or whatever it might be, that there's not a lot of room in my head at that stage for the mortgage payment or the work challenge. And it's genuinely the only thing. As you probably gathered by now, I'm pretty garrulous, but when I come back from fishing, Kat, my wife, sometimes says, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. I think this is how I'm supposed to be. I think I'm supposed to be this silent and reflective. And only fishing does that for me, Pete.
It's interesting what you said about the other sports as well, because they have an element possibly of going against someone else or interacting with someone else. So it probably, you use the brain there, may use it to operate on a different level. There may be a team aspect of it, so there's a little bit of pressure of it. But the word that kept bouncing around in my head while you were talking was solitary sport. Do you think that is why it works on a different level? That because you've got time, generally speaking, on your own to reset and do all the things that you want to clear and download from your mind. And it's much easier to do that when you don't have to worry if you're playing cricket that you've got to put your pads on in 5 minutes, or if you're football or rugby or tennis, whatever that may be. Do you think that might be why this is becoming more of a thing for many people?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it works on another level, right? Without getting too deep about it, but there's in the cottage, there's a book by a guy called Andy McGeaney. He lives down in Lynmouth now, and he was a top sort of psychologist for companies, for businesses. And then he was a psychology for the National Health Service. And he's done some brilliant work on how it can affect mental health, fishing. And I know from the last podcast, your last sort of guest was talking about it. I think it does something to the brain. I think it really does. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, and I don't know how the brain works. If I did, I'd be a bit smarter than I am. But I genuinely do think it works like that. And I think if you, it wouldn't be the same in an urban environment. I mean, I'm not talking about like trout in the town fishing, sort of, that sort of thing. It's just something about being outdoors and connected to nature, which is different from a different sport, that's for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Nice little wormhole to go down, that one. I wanted to, you mentioned about your teacher, you mentioned your brother. Are they the people who have had a huge influence on you as a fly angler, or is there someone else you'd like to shout out that really helped you along on this path?
No, I didn't have any, we were self-taught. We didn't have an instructor or a mentor or anyone really adult at all. I think the credit goes entirely to my parents who just let us out. We were just off running, made our own mistakes, like I say, fell in a lot, had the time to learn from the bottom up the hard way, for right and for wrong. So I think my parents deserve the credit for letting us out and letting us do our things. I think it's quite hard now in this day and age. I think there's a lot of fear in the world to let young people off on their own in the countryside or anywhere else, actually. But I think you have to do that if you want your kids to grow and to experience the things that they need to be full people, right? And my parents did that, for which I'm eternally grateful.
So does that mean that fly fishing's always been with you from that young age? Have there been times where your relationship has widened out a little bit, but it's always come back? Or have there been periods where you've said, actually, yeah, I've not picked up a rod for 5 years or 3 years or whatever it may be?
I expect, like a lot of people, you get to sort of 17, 18. In my case, I went to college and did biology at Exeter, notionally, although I was mainly chasing beer, girls, hockey balls, any other shaped ball. And through that period and the first year when I came to the city, I was working in London in advertising. I don't think I've really fished that much. It was always in my mind. It was always there. I'd read about it. I'd participate in sort of it mentally, but I didn't go very much because I had a full life of other stuff. And when I got to my mid-20s and I started fishing again, it was like, what were you thinking? Why weren't you doing this? All the benefits that it brought to me mentally, as well as just being outside and the fun of it and the camaraderie of fishing with different people and stuff like that, came sort of way, like far stronger than even before. And that's what made me slightly obsessive and took me on to qualifying as an instructor. And since then, it's been a matter of fishing where I'm able and when I'm able, wherever it might be. And that's taken me, I pack a smuggler's rod when I've done international business all over the place, and taken me all over the world to wonderful places and meet wonderful, wonderful people as well. So that was the only sort of hiatus, I'd say.
And what made you mentioned about the casting instructor's exams, the Stanic, what made you want to go that route?
I think I'm a bit obsessive about many things. At this point, if my family were here, they would laugh out loud or fall around laughing. I am obsessive about things. I get into a narrow groove and follow them to an illogical conclusion. And fishing is one of those sort of things which I push to, as far a level as I'm able to with my skills and energy. And I just scraped in. I think they felt sorry for me or felt they should have some younger bloke in there. I mean, God knows. I'm quite glad we're not fishing now, Pete. Unfortunately, we tried to get together, didn't we, on the Lyn? But you'd laugh if you saw my casting now, that's for sure.
I don't do that. Don't you worry about that. It's the most important thing's the enjoyment. And some of the things you said there were, again, getting a little bit deeper, so apologies. It quite strikes me that, how that fishing gene, some of us have it, and some of us just go fishing. There's a difference, isn't there?
I think fishing's one of those things that attracts obsessives, don't you? I mean, there are people that can go once a year, they just tip up and they have a great time, right? That's sort of what I do with golf. I don't care about golf. I go because it's great banter with my mates and things like that, but I'm not tuned into that, whereas fishing I really am. And I've met more obsessives in the fishing game than I have in others, do you know what I mean, than in rugby or cricket and, things like that. People that take it to an unreasonable level one way around or another. I think it's almost a religion that takes people to a, quite an extreme place in some ways. I might be wrong on that, but it feels like that sometimes when you meet people that have spent their entire life and you go, what, you've been like four times a day, like for 25 years. Yeah. Can't get enough. Do you know what I mean? Or, like, so hang on a second. How many nights have you been out for sea trout this year? Okay, that's quite hardcore. So if the time allows, I would do more. But there are people out there that are truly obsessive.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? That mix, like you say, people go once a year and it may be mayfly time and they have a lovely time and catch some fish. But then it sort of goes away and something else comes in where, like you say, many of us, and I'm sure many of the people listening to this as well, it's everything, isn't it? And I'm watching water heights at the moment. I'm glued to, do I need to change a tip before I go fishing tomorrow? Should I make my tippet a little bit longer before I tie a fly on in the morning? What should I be doing? Rain on the roof, I often talk about. Our cat came in at silly o'clock and was wet, and I'm thinking, I gave him a stroke because he let us know he was in. But I was thinking, right, does that mean the river's going to come up? And that is, like you say, that obsessive thing. But is it passion as well, though? Is it because we love this so much that we think about it so much and want to be part of it so much?
I don't know. I think it's because it covers so many bases, doesn't it? Right. You can be a great artist. You can be into books. You could fill your boots with fishing literature. I mean, Richard's book, he gave it to me to take to the cottage, and I had to bring it back because I hadn't finished it, right? I couldn't put it down. So I will take it down to the cottage for the next guest, I promise. But, you can get into it that way. The tying of the flies, if you're an artisan, if you're a craftsperson, that you could do forever. Then there's the, fishing itself of many different natures, right? Then there's the casting. If you're into that sort of thing, you could just do that forever, and people sort of do. And then, which I'm also passionate about, is the conservation side, the river, the energy in the river, the flows, how to protect it, how to keep it cool, all of the other sort of things. So I think fishing transcends so many different things that it's about 28 hobbies or sports in one. And that for me is the interesting piece, is I can come at it afresh every single day through a different lens. Whether it's through the art, Hooksmith, I came across through the World Trout Trust the other day, and I was just admiring his stuff so much, and, chatting with him about, fonts and logos and trout, all at the same, it's just great. So there's so many different ways you can participate in it. I think that's why I find it so absorbing. If it was just one component, maybe I wouldn't.
The answer. And you segued beautifully for me into my next round of questions as well, because you've recently become chairman of the World Trout Trust. How did that come about? And was it an easy decision to take such a role?
I've always been a member of the World Trout Trust, one way around or another, and other conservation and other clubs and societies as well, and always really admired their work. But from afar, if I'm honest, I donated the cottage, to the auction and would donate and things like that, but didn't get actively involved. My time is spent sort of fishing and doing sort of other things. And then I saw this job come up, chairman of the Wild Trout Trust. I thought, oh man, that's an incredible sort of, job, but I could never do that. Right. And then I said, oh, hang on a second, I've got a biology degree. I know about sort of casting and fishing and that sort of things. And then I thought about the skills that they might need in the charity, and my background in advertising and fundraising and organizing boards and just doing transformation, which is essentially what I do for the day job to pay for the fishing. So I sort of idly mentioned it to my brother, and he was like, do it. I was like, oh, okay. Sort of idly mentioned it to my wife, and she was like, you've got to do it, you've got to do it, you've got to try, you won't lose anything by trying. And then my kids were even more on me. So I thought, oh God, I've got to, I'm sort of boxed into a corner here. So applied with no expectation, if I'm honest, of getting through. Felt like a fraud or an outside for most of my life, but so surprised and charmed by the interview. An incredible, talented organization with hugely professional people, humbling, just the trustees, never mind the conservation officers and things like that. And through some circumstance, I've ended up in the role and am loving it. As you can imagine, the opportunity to learn about, for me, it's learning on the job. I'm not a conservationist. I'm not a hardcore, biologist or anything else. So I'm learning about those aspects, but also being able to pass on, I hope, some wisdom from my commercial background of what I've done for a job. I'm working with the team to set a strategy, for the next 3 to 5 years, that can operate at the scale and the pace of the challenges. We do incredible work, 250 visits, we'll do 90 odd projects a year, but there's 50,000, 60,000 weirs and dams in this country, never mind the amount of straightened rivers, dredged rivers, so we focus on those physical side of river restoration. And the challenges are enormous. And if we say we're going to build another 1.7 million houses over the next few years, what do you think is going to happen to the rivers? So we've got to operate at that scale and urgency to save the river habitat that supports our trout, grayling, and the other wildlife around it.
Does that mean then for you, with this expansion that we're seeing, that it's becoming a challenging role for yourselves and, like you say, some of the other societies that you're members of as well, to be able to try and keep on top of these things as much as you can when there's still you've used the word dams and weirs and things like that. Does it feel like you're trying to push back that dam some of the time because there's so much to do? And could it sometimes feel as though, you want to get so much deeper into it, but you're almost just kind of scratching the surface just to stand still, I guess, in some respect, because there's so much out there that needs help and attention from people like yourself?
I think it's very true. If you look at the challenges facing rivers, you've got this massive one, climate, right? That's not something that we as an organization set to tackle, right? There are other organizations and government and, global policies that need to sort of work, on things like that. You've got agricultural runoff, which requires sort of government policy, it requires education, it requires funding, there's a whole bunch of stuff then. And then the third sort of, biggest area, if you like, is these physical areas. I mean, there's a huge amount of noise, and thank goodness there is, around poo, right, about sewage. And Fergal and everyone has done an incredible job of igniting that. But I think a lot of people sort of forget that agriculture and then physical is a bigger challenges for water quality, according to the water directive, right, the freshwater water directive. So we're very focused on those challenges, and that's daunting enough, right, Pete? Do you know what I mean? And I think you're right, is, you row really hard to get permissions to do the work that Sean Leonard, our wonderful sort of director, and the conservationists have to do. That's tons of paperwork. It's ploughing through legal processes as well. It's not a matter of just chucking wood in a river. Do you know what I mean? You have to make sure you've got the flood permissions, the science permission, the conservation permissions. In some instances, geologists. Sometimes you have to have an archaeologist on site for the whole of the duration, which you have to fund and get sign off for. So you're right. It is very hard work. It takes committed specialist people, and it takes the funds to be able to make that happen. No one can do it on their own. It takes a village to do one of these projects. Do you know what I mean? You're working in partnership with a Rivers Trust, maybe the RSPB, maybe 5 or 6 organizations. So yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
But you must be, having seen it from the outside, now seeing it from the inside, the work that is done. And I've been a member since it was the Wild Trout Trust Society when it started, that the work that has been done must be pleasing. Yeah, you got it. And so you must have been pleased seeing when these projects are delivered, that must be something that you can take great positive from and say, right, okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah, I personally can't take any credit for any of that stuff, right? I'm just the chairman of the board, so I've just got to organise the trustees to get strategy. The heroes, the men and women in capes, are the conservation officers on the ground who will work with fishing clubs, they'll work with farmers, they'll work with other owners, they'll work with angry people to make them unangry, to get these schemes sort of done. And we work with sort of between sort of 3,000 and 4,000 volunteers each year to get these programs up and running. And they're the true heroes that the light should be shone on. And they should take huge pride in it. I'm always sort of saying to Sean and the team, don't they want to do a video, and don't they want to do some social media about this incredible project? I was reading the report of a project the other day is where we've increased fivefold the number of wild trout in, I think it's 18 months. I might be wrong on that, but 18 months this year is fivefold, right? And they're like, oh no, we don't want to shout about it. We don't, I don't want to make a fuss about it. It's just what I do, which is incredible, isn't it? Sometimes I wish we could shine more of a light on it so that I could attract more funding, attract more members, get more people involved in that. But they're the heroes. It's fantastic. And I hope they feel as proud as I am on their behalf of the work that they do.
And I'd like to shout out people like Johnny Gray, Rob Mungrove, who's I've been talking to a little bit. I'm desperate to catch a trout in Essex, my home county. So he's been really helpful with that as well, to say that I've been able to catch a wild trout, in Essex. But there's lots of these things that, like you say, these things cost money, and that's why that auction's so important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We get funded in different ways. Some comes from the Environment Agency ROD license, which comes in to allow us to do some of our sort of work, and others comes from other government funds and other schemes that we take. But membership, donations, wills, legacies, and the Wild Trout Trust auction is incredibly important. And for those that haven't seen the auction, do have a look at it, right? Because you can get to fish on water you will never, ever, ever get to see any other time, right? Water that is sort of part of clubs or owned privately. People very generously donate them to the auction. And you can bid on them, and you can get them in a snippet of not there. It's just the normal price, but the value of them, I think it is. They're incredible special days. And a lot of people do their own guiding. They give up time, and so you can get to fish with incredible people as well that either know the water or a thing. So I bid this year, and I was lucky enough to win a day with John Beer, the president of the Wild Trout Trust, but we went char fishing on Lake Coniston. I never could have done that or would have known about it or done it if it hadn't have been for the Wild Trout Trust auction. So I'd encourage anyone, if you've got the chance to donate something, please do that. Chrissy in the office will be delighted, but definitely have a look at them, even if you can't afford some of them. I understand that the cost of living is tough right now, but some of them are just amazing.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of those wonderful yet frustrating things. And I want to focus on the wonderful thing, that these things are going for amazing money because they're in amazing places. But it's great because it's raising money. So I'm really pleased about that. But, I used to, in the olden days, when it was an auction where you'd put up your hand and bid. I remember going to those many, many, many years ago, and I rocked up at wherever it was, the Savile Club or wherever that auction was. I can't even remember now. But I was in jeans and a T-shirt, and they had to give me a jacket because you had to wear a jacket in the club. But you couldn't go near any naked flames in that jacket, I can tell you. With that would have gone up pretty quickly. But what it's done
They've still got it there. I think I borrowed the same one.
Yeah. So, you could get the lots there and physically bid, or you could write in your bid. But now what it does is wonderful that it raises all that money, but it makes you sort of search out the more esoteric stuff. And that's what I've done over the last few years. Oh, that's a place I'd probably, like you say, that I'd never get to fish, but it's a little bit different. And those things, that's the great thing, isn't it? That it may not be the test or the itching, but I tell you, if you're listening and thinking about putting a lot in, I'll probably come and fish the place, because if it's somewhere a little bit different, I'm into that, and I know lots of others. And that's the nice thing about it, isn't it?
Yeah, I completely agree. Listen, I told you earlier, I was brought up fishing on the Avon and tributaries, waters just outside Bath, and it came up on the Wild Trout Trust, and it was probably the cheapest lot of all of them. But I was able to take my brother down, and we got shown around by the guy on the rivers we fished when we were 14, 15 years old. That for me was what the Wild Trout Trust is about, sort of stuff in terms of being able to provide these incredible things. Fishing on a water that the Wild Trout Trust had done the advisory visit, advised on the work to catch wild trout, right, in a place that has gone through changes and is now set for the future again. that for me is the experience that we should be doing in fishing anyway, aside from the Wild Trout Trust. But conserving nature, going back, building memories, building dreams, and preparing it for the next generation. So it was a nice full circle for me to be able to participate.
Absolutely. And I know as a result of those auction lots, I think I got it a couple of years running with Roger Smith on the Borders waters around by the Malverns, and I fished with him and you create friendships as a result of it as well, which is a really nice thing, and it leads on to other things as a result of that. And I think we came down here and fished as well, and it's wonderful that those little offshoots as a result of it have been really pleasing from a personal standpoint. So thank you for that. I've really enjoyed that. Why and how should people join the Wild Trout Trust?
How's easy? Go to the website. There are memberships as an individual. My wife and I joined as a couple. My wife is the more talented fisher of the duo and always outfishes me, as is traditional in any sort of fishing couple. There are memberships for seniors, juniors, river keepers, clubs small and sort of big. So there's a place for everyone. I think for me, it's really straightforward. It's just incredible value. And when I mean value, I don't mean money. I mean, you join a group of the most like-minded people. You join a vibrant, throbbing community of people that want to save the habitat for the trout and the grayling and the sea trout and other fish to do it. That's the first reason, right? If you just want to be at home with the right people, join. It's less than 15p a day, right? And that's at the most expensive side of sort of things. You get incredible discounts from all of the tackle retailers. But possibly for some people, it's the fact that they can participate in the restoration of their own club or their own stretch of water if they're able, or to volunteer to join on to those sort of schemes and really just say thank you to the trout that has given us. So, you know, if you want to see it in one way, it's like if you've enjoyed your fishing, just say thank you for less than 15p a day, and you get all of the other benefits of the auction and, you know, all of the good stuff. But that would be it, really. I think it's a thank you to the trout.
So let's fast forward a little bit. I don't know how long your tenure lasts, if it rotates or if it's until you decide, right, it's time for a little bit of a change. But when you do leave that role, what would you like to have seen happen as chairman?
Well, probably the trustees are plotting my demise as they're getting to the end of this podcast, sort of, Pete. I would imagine that they've had enough of me already, and I will be shortly having more time to fish than chair the board. That notwithstanding, I would love to see a couple of key topics. One, we need to sort of change our mix of funding. Okay, so we're very reliant on a project by project basis. We get funding just to do one project. So I'd love to see us that we could make more from the auction, do more from the membership, and therefore have more discretion in the projects that we do. So we can go where the problems are, not where the funding is. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So that we've got discretion in the projects that we can take and make the biggest difference, rather than the funding just being linked to a specific project. So that's one thing that the trustees and Sean is very sort of keen on achieving. So it allows us to operate at the scale of the problems, like I talked about before. The second piece is sort of democratization of river restoration work. We're going to have 80% of people living in urban spaces. Things like the Wild Trout Trust and fishing tends to be seen as something that's rural. We run an incredible program called Trout in the Town, which allows people to look after their rivers in cities, in suburbs, in towns and villages where they are, and organize a great toolkit for that. And so I think we need to democratize our work into sort of towns. And the other piece, and with that comes through other levels of diversification into other communities that maybe fly fishing isn't associated with, right? And then the last piece is the next generation. I would love to think that we've got a vibrant set of younger members that are coming through the ranks, We run these incredible schemes in classrooms where we put mayflies into classrooms and people can watch them and see the life cycle and understand trout through that, and do talks in many schools and things. I'd love for us to be able to feel sure that we have a secure future, not just for the Wild Trout Trust, but for the trout through those sorts of general sort of schemes. And the last thing, I want to be about 80 times bigger to make sure that we I don't lack ambition, maybe reality, but ambition I don't lack. I'd love us to be able to do more, just do more, and to work with, the other great NGOs and charities that are out there, whether it's Fish League or River Action, Rivers Trusts, to be able to help them in their work too.
That's lovely, Simon. And I can see why you got the role as well. I can see why you got it. And the way you're speaking, the things that you said make perfect sense. So I'm pleased and thrilled to hear that you're chairman, and look forward to seeing what's happening. Shout out to Theo Pike as well, and Paul Gaskell, who are involved in those projects as well that you mentioned as well, who are great guys and I like very, very much. So let's move on a little bit. And you've mentioned Iceland, but have you travelled much with a fly rod? Have you been to many places?
Yeah, when you look back, it sort of happens by accident, doesn't it? You go, oh, hang on, I'm getting married, I'm going on honeymoon, I better take my rod. That was a crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
So that was the Caymans. Do you know what I mean? And then I've been lucky enough to fish in St. Lucia, South Africa, Venezuela, Iceland, bits and bobs of Europe, North America, a little bit. Not everywhere I want to fish. I've got endless places I would love to go, and maybe not always in the most extraordinary circumstances. I remember booking I only had a day, so I booked a guy in Florida, Captain Bob or something his name was, right? And I was assured that he could put me over bonefish and permit down in the Keys. And he did, but he put me with a bubble float with a 2.0 hook with about 18 prawns threaded on it. It wasn't the fly fishing experience I was looking at. I was quite happy to catch. I did catch a very, very big permit, mind. But so yeah, it doesn't always work out, does it? These things, but hopefully more. At some stage in my retirement, I'll get some more time for that.
And when you've been to these places and then you come and fish home again, does it make you look at home water slightly differently and perhaps love it just a tiny bit more?
100%. 100%. Everywhere you go, you take something from it that you bring back home. And home also means somehow more when you've sort of been away. So I remember I went 3 weeks, right? It's a long story, but I managed to spend 3 weeks in Los Rocos. So I was bone fishing every single day, hardcore, right? It was absolutely amazing. There were two things that I wanted when I got home. One was chips, and the other was to fish small, wild brown trout. It just does that, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, I think it does. And while you mentioned Los Rocos as well, that I think I've been lucky enough to go there. It was a number of years ago now, but the false albacore, that was the fish that took me by surprise. I don't know if you got shots at those, but that was just extraordinary fun.
Yeah, I snapped the top of a rod on one. It was some sort of experimental graze 8-weight, I think. And for whatever reason, it just snapped clean in half. And I didn't get another chance. So that was a bit frustrating.
They're amazing fish. And I'm sure listeners have probably had the opportunity or have thought about them. They're like big mackerel and they're strong and they bust about 60, 70 feet away. And you've got to throw a long cast right in and rip. And then it comes to life. And it was just mind-blowing from that point of view. And of course, the pancakes and everything else is fantastic for the bonefish. But yeah, those false albacore really did something to me. But you said there's places that you're dreaming of that you'd like. Where is I'm going to give you a saltwater destination and I'm going to give you a freshwater destination. Give me two places that are on that list that you think, I'd really like to throw a fly.
Well, that's so hard. That's so hard. That's harder than the music question, Pete. That's awful. How can you do that to me without allowing me a week to prepare for it? Listen, I'm going to start with the fresh water. I think I would like to be abandoned in Alaska or somewhere like that for a very long time, just to punt about this place in a log canoe, camp, find new water, find fish that have never seen a horrible cast like mine before. So I think for freshwater, I could happily be convinced of that. Saltwater is also very tough, isn't it? I don't know of the destination. I mean, I've seen all the videos of GTs. I've obviously designed in my mind a bird fly. Everyone's seen the Attenborough documentary of, I've designed that endlessly in my mind about how I'm going to catch a GT 3 feet above the sort of the water. But I think it's going to be permit fishing somewhere in the world. I think the challenge of the enigma of the riddle of a permit would probably be the thing that would be my last trip on Earth. I think.
Good choices. Good choices. And his ears must be burning some more because Richard, you were saying, is down at your cottage at the moment. You talked about broken rods, and in his book, he talks about being on a trip in Cuba, I think, and his friend broke the tip of his rod playing a fish and then was playing it through. The next section broke and then the next section broke, which is quite amusing. It makes me smile thinking about it now, and the way that he describes it and the way that he talks about it is fantastic. Talking of tackle, you talked about you had an experimental or a prototype graze rod that you took with you. You talked about a smuggler rod. Do you have a Hall of Fame piece of tackle? Are you a tackle hound as well? Are you somebody who draws through the Sportfish brochure or other brochures and think, oh, actually, yeah, I need that? Or are you happy with your lot?
I read fishing brochures like other people would read books. Do you know what I mean? But actually, on the whole, I'm not a kit merchant at all. I fish with very few flies. They're in a tatty plastic box held together with a plastic band. My kit's falling apart. I've not got as many rods as many sort of people. But if I've got one bit of kit that I really love, it was when I qualified as a Stanek instructor. Orvis supported the scheme at the time, and I managed to get hold of this 1 ounce 7 foot. I think it's a 4-weight. I'm not sure. I think that bit's worn off it. But it was a 1 ounce 7 foot little brook rod. I think it's an HLS. It's almost got like 2 rubber bands on to sort of on the reel mount. There's no reel mount as such. It's just the cork, and you just like. And I love that rod. Fits the style of fishing. I've had it a long time. I got it at the time as I qualified. So how many 28 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that. It's slow actioned, soft. Love it. So that would be my bit of kit. Reels for me are bobbins that hold line, unless I'm salmon fishing or, going where I actually need the drag. I don't have some finely engraved, hand painted. Sadly, I don't have a VR, but if VR are listening, I would love one, by the way, and I am available. But I don't have the means, nor do I choose to spend it on that. I'd rather go fishing with the stuff that I've got, I think, Pete.
Nice choices. Nice choices. Right, here's the fastball. You've alluded to that already. For the fly culture playlist thing that we have on Spotify that I promise I will update, but it's just nice hearing these songs, and I guess you can go look them up as well. What is the song that will set the tone for you, that may be on the car for a day's fishing, it may be in the headphones on a plane flight to somewhere lovely fishing? What is the song that plays?
Yeah. Again, this is like the other one. I mean, I'd love to come up with something witty, something super cool, right? The thing that if I had the presence of mind to do this, and it's unfortunately not the way my brain works, I would have something like the Ride of the Valkyries. You know, the movie, the Nam movie, where that's the way my mind thinks about fishing. It would be I would be all in that zone, right? That's what I should play. And now I've thought of it, I can't get it out of my head. I am going to play it next time I go fishing. But actually, what I have is a playlist of new music each year. Every single year, I start a new music playlist, and it's current. It's what I hear on TikTok, or the kids send me, or I'm walking through a shop and I'll Shazam it, or whatever it will be. And so I will probably have that on. So I thought To be honest and direct for this question, I would just look at what I've got on the bottom of my Spotify playlist, because it's probably the last thing I heard. So I've got Yellow Moon by Amazon. Actually, it's an old song is the next one in there, but it came on, it was on an advert. I still work in advertising, and it was Hang On Sloopy by the McCoys, if you know the 60s sort of track. And then before that, I have got Mama's Eyes by Mete. So that's the honest answer. It'll be whatever's on this year's playlist.
And I think these things change, don't they, as well? That with the mood and how the day is, it can change daily, those sorts of things, can't they? It is a bit of a fastball.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because it would change. Have you ever been grilled on yours? Have you ever declared yours on the podcast? I've not heard you declare yours, actually.
Do you know, I was a guest on another one a little while ago, and they asked me, and I named some groups. I think I probably said a few, and you could feel them. It was audio, so I couldn't see the person I was talking with, and they were in the States, and I named them, and I could sense that they were staring at me quizzically or blankly because they had no idea what I was actually talking about. There's always something. I love the Specials and will always love the Specials and what they stood for, so they were always important to me. There's a group called Maze that came out of Los Angeles that I really loved. Yeah, there's, like you say, it changes all the time. There's so many different songs that sometimes you're in the mood for. So I was listening to Quadrophenia, the soundtrack to Quadrophenia just the other day, and just to set the tone, and it can change, can't it? And that's the wonderful thing about it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We could do another whole hour on swapping music notes by the sounds of things. I think we'd be pretty tuned on that.
Absolutely. Well, look, we've spoken for over an hour, Simon. I think listeners will have a wonderful idea of the person you are, and that's really important to me because of the role that you've taken on as well. They know who's behind these sorts of things, and I think that's really important. But if they want to contact you, if they want to get in touch with you, how do they find you? And also, please feel free to shout out Primrose Cottage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. By all means, you can find me on all the social sort of media channels. If you just search for sort of Chairman Wild Trout Trust or something like that, I'm sure you'll be able to find me, or you can access me via the website. And I'm learning, right? I'm really keen to hear what people think, what they want, what they don't like, and build connections and bridges both with other NGOs, other societies and clubs across the land. You know, we've got an incredible executive team, so I'm normally a conduit to that team. I'm not an executive. I'm, the chair of the organisation, but I really need to learn to be able to do my job. So please do reach out and connect, and I will sort of pass that on. And the other thing is, we have this little cottage called Primrose Cottage on Exmoor. If anyone wants to stay in a fishing-based, small, tiny cottage, but right on the banks of the East Lyn, which we've talked about, or bid on it in the auction, please do. We'd be delighted. Kat and I would be delighted to welcome you to our little fishy home.
Perfect. I think, listeners, it's fair to say that Simon is one of us. So please reach out to him and let's see if we can help. He has a clear plan, but, let him know what you think. And I think it's great that we're able to have these conversations and people are able to get to know the people behind the organisation or the title as well. And I think this has been a wonderful example of that today. So, Simon, I would like to say a massive thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast.
It's a great pleasure and a privilege to follow in the footsteps of, as you told me, I think 299 other guests. So big shout out to you for the work that you do and all that you've done to popularise our sort of pastime and get the right people on the show. Really appreciate it.
You are most welcome. Well, everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, there'll never be any charge for these. It's just wonderful to talk to people about the thing that we love so much. There'll be plenty more coming very, very soon. Thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.